Hey, welcome. We're about to dig into the secret and, let's be honest, sometimes pretty shocking histories behind words you probably use every single day. You think you know what you're saying, but the real stories, they're often hiding just beneath the surface. So, let's get into it. I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about it? We say things like, saved by the bell, or it's raining cats and dogs without even blinking. But where did they actually come from? Well, the answers are probably not what you're expecting. So let's take a little trip, shall we? We're hopping in a time machine back to the 16th century, a time that was a whole lot grittier, a lot smellier, and believe it or not, way more interesting than you might think when it comes to our language. Here's our plan. We're going to follow the course of a single day, from waking up in the morning to some pretty macabre nighttime rituals. We'll see how the wild realities of 16th century life literally shaped the words we speak today. And hey, make sure you stick around to the end because we've got a cool bonus fact for you. Okay, so let's imagine our day is just beginning. First up, hygiene, or what passed for it back then. Forget your daily shower. No. We're talking about an annual bath. Yeah, once a year. That's right, one bath a year. And it was usually in May. This, believe it or not, is why June became the most popular month for weddings. Why? Well, because the bride and groom still smelled pretty good. But by the time the big day actually rolled around, things were starting to get a little pungent. And this leads us to the original, brilliant purpose of the bridal bouquet. It wasn't just for decoration. Nope, it was basically a personal air freshener, held strategically to mask body odor. A little less romantic than we all thought, right? Now, the bathing process itself, it had this really strict hierarchy. The entire family used the exact same tub of water. First up was the man of the house. He got the nice, clean water. He was followed by the other men, then the women, then the kids, and dead last was the baby. So by the time it was the baby's turn, the water was so murky and just disgusting, you could hardly see through it. And that is the surprisingly literal origin of the phrase, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." Wow. Okay, let's move from personal hygiene to the home itself. Most people lived in houses with these big, thatched roofs. Just think thick straw piled high with nothing underneath. It was cozy, I guess, but it definitely came with some uninvited roommates. See, these roofs were the warmest place around, so they became a perfect home for cats, mice, bugs, you name it. But when it rained, that straw got super slippery, and the animals would sometimes lose their footing and just fall right off the roof, which is where we get it's raining cats and dogs. And that created problems inside too. Bugs and, animal droppings could fall right onto your bed. That's actually why canopy beds were invented. They were like a little protective shield. The floors? Often just packed earth. So if you were poor, you were quite literally dirt poor. Now, wealthier folks, they had slate floors they'd cover with straw or thresh, and they'd put a piece of wood at the door to keep it all in. That piece of wood, the original threshold. All right, so after a long day of avoiding falling animals, it is definitely time for dinner. Let's see what's on the menu back in the 1500s. You know that nursery rhyme, right? Well, turns out it was a pretty literal description of dinner. Most families had one giant pot just hanging over the fire. They'd just keep adding new ingredients to it every day, eating from a stew that might have leftovers in it from like a week ago. Meat was a huge luxury, and pork was a real status symbol. A man who could afford to put pork on the table was proving he could bring home the bacon. And when guests came over, you'd show off your wealth by offering them a little piece to sit and chew the fat. Even bread was all about status. The workers, they got the burnt bottom of the loaf. The family got the middle. But the honored guests, oh, they got the soft, fluffy top portion, what they called the upper crust. Okay, as night falls, our story takes a much darker turn. We're going to talk about one of the biggest, most terrifying fears of the era, death. Or more specifically, being mistaken for dead. So people back then often drank from lead cups. Problem was, the combination of ale and lead could sometimes knock a person unconscious for days, making them look totally dead. So the family would lay the body out on a table and hold a wake, literally waiting around to see if they'd wake up before the burial. And this fear was completely justified. Get this, as old graves were being reused, they made a horrifying discovery. Roughly 1 out of every 25 coffins they opened had scratch marks on the inside. People were being buried alive. It was a real thing. So to solve this terrifying problem, they came up with this pretty ingenious system. They'd tie a string to the wrist of the body in the coffin, run it up through the lid and the ground, and then attach it to a little bell above the grave. And this is just incredible. This one practice gives us 3 phrases we use all the time. First, someone had to sit in the graveyard all night long just to listen for that bell. This was the original graveyard shift. Second, if that bell actually rang, they'd dig the person up. They were, in the most literal sense you can possibly imagine, saved by the bell. And finally, what do you call a person who was supposed to be dead but rang the bell? A dead ringer. It's just wild that all 3 of these everyday phrases come from this one single morbid custom. Okay, let's lighten the mood a little bit. We're going to step out of the 1500s for one last bonus story about a name you definitely know. Abraham Lincoln had this really beloved dog named Fido. After Lincoln's election, Fido was tragically killed, and the national story of the president's faithful companion helps cement Fido as one of the most classic, enduring names for a loyal dog. It just goes to show you, language is kind of like a living museum, isn't it? The next time you talk about the upper crust or taking the graveyard shift, you'll actually know the strange, fascinating history you're really talking about. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other amazing stories are just hiding in plain sight, in the words you use every single day?